On the train to our anniversary trip, a stranger stared at my husband for 8 hours. Before leaving, she slipped a crumpled note into my hand, turning my perfect marriage into a crime scene in my mind. The paper was barely larger than a post-it. 3 words, written in ink so deliberate it could have been carved into stone. Get out. Now. I stood on a sun-soaked California platform with $8,000 of luggage at my feet, my husband's hand warm on the small of my back, and those 3 words burning a hole straight through my palm. The Pacific Ocean was somewhere past the Spanish-tiled rooftops. A hotel car was already pulling up, black and gleaming. Julian was laughing at something on his phone, the easy, unguarded laugh I had fallen in love with 3 years ago. I closed my fingers around the note. I smiled, and I began to understand that the woman I had been for the last 3 years, the contented, trusting, deliberately unambitious Mrs. Croft, had just been handed her own obituary. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what I thought my life was before you can understand what it actually was. My name is Isabella Rossi. Was Isabella Rossi. Is again, finally, but I'm getting ahead of myself. For the decade before I met Julian, I was a risk management consultant operating out of a 2-room office on the 43rd floor of a building in Midtown Manhattan. I specialized in high-stakes corporate mergers, the kind where both parties are lying to each other, and my job was to figure out exactly how much and in which direction. I was, without being falsely modest, very good at it. I could read a financial prospectus the way other women read horoscopes, quickly, skeptically, and always looking for the part that was designed to distract me from what was real. Then I met Julian Croft at a charity gala in Boston, and I made the single worst risk assessment of my professional life. He was handsome in the way that old American money tends to produce. Broad-shouldered, easy in a tuxedo, with the kind of tan that comes from sailing rather than tanning beds. His private equity firm was growing fast. His references were impeccable. His family background was Boston prep school to Ivy League to Wall Street, the kind of resume that gets printed on a wedding announcement without anyone asking too many questions. By the time we married, I had already begun the slow dissolution of myself that I mistook for love. I closed the firm. I moved into his world. I became Isabella Croft, the polished, supportive wife who attended fundraisers, oversaw renovations, and took pride in the fact that Julian's success was, in some soft and wifely way, also mine. I had been a woman who spent her days hunting for invisible cracks in other people's foundations. I had stopped looking for cracks in my own, which is why it took a stranger on a train to finally make me see them. The trip had been Julian's idea, as all our best gestures were. 3 years of marriage deserved a celebration, he said. A proper one. A luxury sleeper train down the California coast, 2 nights in an oceanfront resort south of Monterey, wine tastings, sunsets, the whole romantic architecture of a life that looked, from the outside, completely perfect. We boarded late afternoon. Our compartment held 4 bunks. Only the 2 of us and 1 other passenger occupied it. The stranger was already settled on the upper bunk across from ours when we stowed our luggage. Mid to late 30s, I guessed. Dark pantsuit, impeccably tailored. Short hair, minimal makeup, the kind of woman whose elegance communicated a complete lack of interest in your opinion of her. I noticed her because she was looking at my husband, not the way women sometimes look at Julian. That quick, appreciative glance, the one I'd learned to spot and feel a small, proprietary flicker about. This was different. This was the way I used to look at balance sheets, methodical, patient, cold. I told myself it was nothing. Julian was handsome. People stared at handsome men. 1 hour passed. She hadn't moved. Her gaze had drifted away exactly twice. Once when a conductor knocked to check our tickets, and once when she went to the restroom and came back and resumed the exact same position, like a machine that had been briefly paused. That woman seems fascinated by you, I murmured to Julian, keeping my voice light, teasing. His smile came out wrong, too tight, too fast. Probably a corporate spy, he said. Rival fund. Happens all the time. It was a plausible answer. Julian's firm operated in a competitive, occasionally cutthroat space. I had heard enough of his dinner stories to know that financial intelligence sometimes got gathered in unusual ways. I almost believed it. The thing that stopped me wasn't logic. It was craft. I had been that kind of professional. And the woman across from us wasn't behaving like someone gathering intelligence. She wasn't taking photos, wasn't recording audio, wasn't even pretending to be casual about it. She was simply watching with the unblinking, unpretending focus of someone who had already gathered her intelligence and was now simply confirming a conclusion she'd already reached. She wasn't studying Julian. She was documenting him. We went to dinner. The dining car smelled of butter and coffee and the particular cheerfulness of strangers sharing a meal. I ate well, talked normally, made Julian laugh twice. When we returned to the compartment, I had half hoped she'd be asleep. She was sitting exactly as we had left her. That night, lying in the narrow bunk with Julian's breathing slow and even beside me, I felt her attention like a physical thing, directional, deliberate. A flashlight held at someone sleeping without their knowledge. I didn't sleep. By the time the train began its final deceleration toward our destination, the sky outside pale blue and uncertain, the Pacific hinting at itself somewhere beyond the switchgrass, I had been awake for approximately 7 hours, pretending not to be. When Julian pulled back the curtains and smiled at me, I smiled back. Dark circles, he said affectionately, smoothing my hair. You didn't sleep. Light sleeper, I said. I'll be fine. He believed it. He packed our bags with his usual efficient cheerfulness. The woman rose too, precise, unhurried, tucked her leather briefcase under her arm, and walked toward the exit without a single glance in our direction. As As if the 8 hours of surveillance had been filed, concluded, and archived, we joined the crowd on the platform. Noise, motion, the particular American chaos of a busy train station, rolling luggage, announcement speakers, the diesel smell of engines winding down. Julian pushed ahead to flag our car. I slowed slightly, creating a natural gap. The woman turned, not toward me, against the crowd, as if she'd forgotten something. The movement brought her directly into my path, and as she passed, I felt something pressed into my palm. A folded square of paper, placed with a surgeon's precision. She didn't look at me. She was already gone, swallowed by the crowd. Nothing left of her but the brief afterimage of a gray pantsuit and a deliberate back. Julian called from ahead. "Everything okay?" "Someone bumped me," I said. "I'm fine." I closed my hand around the note and kept walking. I didn't read it until we were in the hotel car. Julian absorbed in a call with one of his investors, the tinted windows sealing us off from the California sunshine, chilled water bottles in the console, everything soft and expensive and suffocating. Under the pretense of organizing my purse, I unfolded the note. Hotel stationery. 3 words in a confident, decisive hand. "Get out. Now." No name, no context, no explanation. I folded it back up. My hands were completely steady. I was proud of that later, when I thought back on it. The old Isabella, the professional one, had surfaced for just long enough to keep me from doing anything visible with the white-hot panic that was screaming through my nervous system. I looked at my husband through the tinted window's reflection, his profile, the line of his jaw, the easy, practiced warmth with which he laughed into his phone, and I began, for the first time in 3 years, to actually look, not with Mrs. Croft's eyes, with mine. The hotel was beautiful. Of course it was. Julian didn't do anything by halves. Oceanfront suite, top floor, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a Pacific so blue it looked digitally enhanced. The butler brought champagne. White parasols dotted the beach below like dropped punctuation. Julian drew the blackout curtains and told me to rest. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling and thought, the note was real. The woman was real. The look in her eyes, that specific species of controlled pity that professionals use when they know something terrible that you don't, had been real. I waited until the shower was running. Then I moved. His briefcase sat on the luggage rack, unlocked, which should have been my first clue. Julian was meticulous about his briefcase. He used a 4-digit combination even in our own bedroom. But today, with everything apparently going according to his plan, he had gotten careless. Small errors. The beginning of overconfidence. I opened it. Laptop, project documents, a leather folder with pitch decks and market analyses. Everything plausible, everything accounted for. I was almost ready to call myself a paranoid fool when my fingertips found the seam. A hidden zipper. Same dark fabric as the lining. I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't spent 10 years handling documents engineered specifically to make things difficult to notice. I unzipped it. The paper inside was thick, expensive, fresh with the smell of a laser printer used recently. I unfolded it. Life insurance policy. Policyholder, Julian Croft. Insured, Isabella Rossi. My eyes moved down the page with the detached efficiency of a machine that has not yet decided how to feel. Coverage amount, $30,000. Effective date. I checked again, yesterday, 1 hour before we boarded the train. Beneficiary, Julian Croft. The shower was still running. I stood in the closet of a luxury California hotel suite with $30 million worth of my own death in my hands, and I did the only thing I knew how to do in a crisis. I thought about the casual mentions over the last several months, the funding gap, the leveraged position, the overseas project that needed at least $15 million to stay afloat. I thought about the way he'd seemed simultaneously stressed and oddly purposeful over the last few weeks. I thought about the train, the coastal resort, the activities Julian had planned, ocean kayaking, a cliff walk tour, a sunset boat trip on open water, $30 million, exactly double the number he'd mentioned needing. Filed the same day we left. I refolded the policy, replaced it exactly, wiped the briefcase with my robe sleeve, walked back to the bed and got under the covers 4 seconds before I heard the shower turn off. When he came out with his towel and his clean citrus soap and his tender, concerned smile, I was already half certain that the man who had kissed my forehead every night for 3 years had purchased my death like a futures contract. "You're awake," he said warmly. I said. "I think I have a fever." The back of the note had a phone number, and one word, Sterling. I lay in the darkness for another hour after Julian settled at his desk, my phone under the covers, my mind pulling at threads. Sterling. I rotated through a decade of professional contacts before it landed. Rebecca Sterling, forensic accountant, partner at one of the top investigative firms on the East Coast. We had worked together exactly once, on a cross-border merger that turned out to be significantly less clean than either party had represented. She had been precise, relentless, and unimpressed by nearly everything. I remembered her face. I looked at the woman on the train in my memory again. Yes. Without allowing myself to hesitate, I opened an encrypted email account I hadn't touched in 2 years, composed 3 sentences, attached photos I hadn't taken yet, and stopped. Then I crept back to the closet, photographed every page of the policy, close on the signatures, close on the effective date, close on my name, and returned to the bed and sent the email. "Miss Sterling, this is Isabella Rossi. I need information on my husband, Julian Croft. Name your price." I deleted the sent message, cleared the cache, and put the phone back under the pillow. Somewhere in the sitting room, Julian typed steadily, thinking about whatever a man thinks about out when he has just activated a $30 million plot against his wife. I stared at the ceiling, and the old Isabella, the one who had spent a decade finding cracks in things that looked flawless, she came back, not with grief or rage, with absolute clarifying cold. Rebecca's reply arrived the following evening. Email received. I'm sorry I had to warn you that way. The situation is more complicated than you think. If you decide to fight back instead of run, meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., Ocean Breeze Cafe, across from your hotel. I'll be waiting. R. Sterling. I read it twice, then I deleted it. Run. That word has never made sense to my nervous system. I don't know if it's professional formation or just the particular architecture of my personality, but fight or flight has always resolved for me into a third option: build a case. The next morning, I told Julian I wanted fresh air and some light shopping. He offered to join me. I smiled and said he had his conference call, didn't he? He relented. He reminded me not to stay out too long. He kissed my cheek. I waited for the elevator doors to close, and my smile was gone before the floor numbers had changed twice. The Ocean Breeze Cafe was the kind of California spot where the coffee is excellent and nobody is listening to anyone else's conversation. Rebecca was already at a corner table, dark jeans and a pale blouse, a black coffee untouched in front of her. She gestured to the chair across from her without standing. Her face carried the same quality I'd seen on the train, the settled composure of someone who has long since processed the worst-case scenario and is now simply operating. I didn't want another victim, she said before I could thank her, especially not a colleague I respect. You're investigating him, I said. 3 months. She slid a manila folder across the table. I was hired by a woman named Patricia Huang, former executive. He spent 2 years cultivating her trust, then systematically extracted her professional network and personal savings through what appeared to be a series of mutually beneficial investment opportunities. She paused. Before her, there was a woman from his college years. Before that, she stopped. Before that is still being reconstructed. I put my hand on the folder but didn't open it yet. Is he going to kill me? I said. It wasn't a question. Rebecca looked at me steadily. He's taken out a $30 million policy on your life. His firm is hemorrhaging. His leverage position is untenable. The coastal location, the planned water activities, they fit a pattern. The cafe noise continued around us, cheerful and indifferent. What do I need to do? I asked. She gave me the smallest smile I had ever seen on a human face. You shouldn't be asking me. You should be asking yourself, Ms. Rossi. I'm a data provider. The strategy is yours. I thought of something my very first mentor in consulting told me 20 years ago in a conference room in Chicago. Every problem is a project. Identify the variables. Control what you can. Document everything else. I stood and extended my hand. Miss Sterling, I said, do you bill by the hour or by percentage of total recovered value? She stood. Her grip was cool and dry and exact. Pro bono, she said. I want to see a textbook demonstration of what a top-tier risk analyst does when the bad asset is in her own bed. I picked up the folder, thanked the barista on my way out, and walked into the California sunshine with the feeling of a gear engaging, that specific sensation of moving from neutral into forward motion after a very long time standing still. I called Mr. Davis from the street, 60 years old, senior partner at one of the most respected matrimonial law firms in New York, the man who had watched me build my career from a glass-walled conference room in Midtown over 20 years. Isabella, he said, surprised. To what do I need a divorce, I said, immediately, and an asset preservation order, and a new will. A beat of silence. Then, are you safe? For now, I said, but we have to move quickly and he cannot know. Mr. Davis did not waste time on expressions of sympathy. This was one of the reasons I had always valued him. Tell me the situation, he said. I told him about the financial irregularities and my concern that Julian was dissipating joint assets. I didn't tell him about the insurance policy yet. I didn't tell him about the brake line. I didn't know about the brake line yet. I gave him enough to act on. Isabella, he said when I finished, I thought my best client had decided to become a house cat. His voice was warm and dry all at once. I'm glad to have you back. I need the will first, I said, and I need it to contain something very specific. I spent the next 4 days playing the most technically demanding role of my life, loving wife, tender, slightly worried about his stress levels, occasionally wistful, absolutely oblivious to the financial machinery grinding beneath our marriage. I poured his wine. I laughed at his jokes. The night he came home from what he claimed was a business meeting in a state of barely suppressed excitement and told me, over a California Red, 4 glasses deep, that he'd found a new financing source that required about $30 million in liquid capital, I blinked and said that sounded complicated, didn't it? And asked if he needed more wine. My phone, tucked in my purse against the chair leg, recorded every word. The following Wednesday, we sat together in Mr. Davis's office reviewing draft wills. Julian's was a masterpiece of romantic gesture. He named me beneficiary of everything. Grand, public, loving. He was betting, of course, that he would never have to pay out. A man who intends to outlive his wife is quite generous in his will. When it was my turn, I explained my terms calmly. Premarital assets, the Boston condo, the savings, to my parents. Our joint marital assets, my share, to Julian, primary. He tried not to look satisfied. He almost managed it. However, I said, in the light, apologetic tone I had been practicing, I've been reading too many mystery novels. I want one small additional clause for peace of mind. Mr. Davis looked at me over his glasses. Please go ahead, Ms. Rossi. I cleared my my throat. In the event of my death by any non-natural cause, including but not limited to traffic accidents, drowning, falling, or abduction, all assets, including premarital property and my share of marital property, will be redirected in full to the National Foundation for the Protection of Women and Children's Rights. This clause supersedes all other provisions. The room went very quiet. I watched Julian's face with the careful attention of someone watching a controlled demolition. The smile didn't disappear. It simply became a different kind of smile. Thinner, recalibrated, performing affection, while something colder managed the situation from behind it. "Mr. Davis," Julian said pleasantly, not looking at me, "we'll proceed as my wife wishes. Her happiness comes first." On the drive home, he didn't speak. I could feel the temperature coming off him like a walk-in freezer. Good. The first landmine had detonated. He made his move 3 weeks later. It was 3:07 in the morning by my phone when I felt the mattress shift. I kept my breathing slow and even and counted his footsteps all the way to the elevator, counted the floors by the mechanical sounds of the building. I opened the security app on my burner phone. The footage was clear. Julian, dressed in black, wearing gloves, crouching beside my white Porsche in the underground garage. He worked with the focus of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and had done it before in his imagination many, many times. 12 minutes total. When he stood, he scanned the garage with the automatic caution of a man who had never considered the possibility that the garage might be watching back. He had not considered that possibility because I had installed the camera 11 days earlier. I saved the footage to 3 separate encrypted servers. Then I lay back in the dark and listened to my own heartbeat until he returned to bed. In the morning, he suggested I take the car out for a drive. "The weather is perfect," he said over breakfast, in a voice I will never entirely unhear. "You should get some air." "I was thinking about that spa outside of town," I said, and watched genuine relief move through his face like weather. "Perfect," he said. "Drive safe." I took the elevator to the lobby and walked straight past the garage and hailed a cab to the Porsche dealership, where we'd serviced the car for 3 years. The service manager's name was Frank Reyes, 22 years in German automotive repair. He went pale when I described what I suspected. He went paler when, back at the building with 2 senior technicians and a running camera on my phone, they lifted the car. "Mrs. Croft," Frank said, his voice careful and controlled in the way of someone managing their own anger, "your primary brake line has been deliberately severed. Clean cut, well hidden. A standard inspection would likely miss it." He paused. "At highway speed, on a curve." "I understand," I said. "I need written statements from both technicians, signed today, and I need the original footage from my garage camera submitted as part of this documentation chain." He looked at me for a long moment. "Are you going to the police?" "Yes," I said, "but not yet." I went to the police that afternoon, not with the brake footage, not yet. Sergeant David Miller, 26 years with the department, the particular settled watchfulness of someone who has heard most human stories at least twice, listened to me describe a strange woman on a train, a cryptic note, some unusual phone calls. I presented it as the concern of a citizen who suspected she and her husband might be targets of an organized financial scam. I handed him a photocopy of the note, and, as if it had tumbled from the note incidentally, Rebecca Sterling's business card. "It fell when she passed it to me," I said. "I didn't know what it was until I got home." Sergeant Miller examined the card. "R. Sterling, forensic accountant." His eyebrows moved slightly. "I'll look into this," he said. "We'll be in contact." Walking out of the station, I sent a text to Rebecca. "Expect a call from Sergeant David Miller. Police report filed. Tell him you're investigating a financial matter connected to Julian. Keep it general. This is about building a paper trail, not launching an investigation." Her reply came in under 4 minutes. Understood. Already prepared for this possibility. Rebecca confirmed to Sergeant Miller that she was conducting a confidential forensic investigation in which Julian Croft was a person of financial interest, and that she had reason to believe his activities may have intersected with certain criminal networks. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The word forensic in combination with the word investigation in combination with my husband's name was now sitting in an official police file in the jurisdiction where we lived. My state-backed insurance policy. The loan agreement was his penultimate play. He put it in front of me on a Sunday afternoon, in the apartment, with California light pouring through the windows and the calm, confident manner of a man who has already calculated the outcome. $10 million in my name, secured against our property, collateral for his overseas investment project. I read it, all of it. Buried in the supplementary agreement, 7 pages in, tucked between boilerplate paragraphs about fund supervision, unlimited personal liability. If his company defaulted, deliberately or otherwise, the full debt plus interest plus penalties would fall to me. The bank could freeze everything I owned until the last cent was recovered. He wanted $30 million in insurance. He also wanted to zero out whatever I might otherwise have had left. Scorched earth. "Can I show it to a lawyer friend?" I asked. "Just to be sure. I don't want to be a bother, but..." "Of course," he said immediately. Too immediately. "You can show it to anyone." Mr. Davis and I spent 90 minutes on that contract. We didn't touch the liability clause. That was the heart of his scheme, and removing it would wave a flag large enough to be seen from space. Instead, we added our own clause, neatly embedded in a section about fund allocation and oversight. In the event that the project described herein is proven fraudulent, or that project funds are misappropriated by the actual controller, Mr. Julian Croft, all repayment liability shall rest solely with Mr. Croft, and the nominal lender, Ms. Isabella Rossi, guilty, shall be entitled to seek double compensation from Mr. Croft's personal assets. 3 days later, I brought the revised contract home. My lawyer looked it over, I said. He just added a few standard protection clauses. Nothing major. Want to review it? Julian flipped to the new pages. His eyes moved over them the way a man's eyes move over text when he's reading for format rather than content, checking that the numbers are right, that the signatures are in the right place. Looks fine, he said. He picked up the pen. We both signed. As I watched him set the pen down with the satisfied gesture of a man closing a deal, I felt nothing that resembled triumph. What I felt was closer to the quiet, technical satisfaction of watching a mechanism operate exactly as designed. The final mediation took place in a conference room at Mr. Davis's firm, 12 weeks after the train. Julian's legal team arrived like men expecting a formality. His attorney, a specialist in contested divorce named Gerald Park, presented the case with the brisk confidence of someone who had won this kind of hearing many times before. An unfaithful wife, fabricated financial misconduct records, a request to freeze my accounts, a demand for $5 million in emotional damages. When Park sat down, the mediator turned to me. Mr. Davis began to stand. I put my hand on his arm. I'll speak, I said. I walked to the front of the room, connected my laptop to the projector, and faced the table. Before we discuss the divorce, I said, I'd like to present a final project assessment on the marriage. The first slide went up. Final risk assessment and liquidation report. The Julian Croft, Isabella Rossi marriage project. Prepared by Isabella Rossi. Julian's face changed in a way I had never seen before. Everything he'd used in 3 years, the warmth, the charm, the practiced tenderness, fell away at once, like a set collapsing. What was underneath was just a man, frightened, calculating, and suddenly very small. I didn't look at him for long. I had work to do. I walked them through the offshore organizational chart Rebecca had built, the Cayman Island shell companies, the 20 million in joint assets transferred out of reach during our marriage. I walked them through the insurance policy. My name, his name as beneficiary. The effective date, time to the hour before we boarded a train to a coastal city where several near-death activities had been planned. I asked the room, in the mild tone of a consultant presenting findings, which of Mr. Croft's investments had required hedging against his wife's life. Then I played the garage footage. Gerald Park stopped writing midway through. One of his associates quietly closed his notepad. Then I presented the loan agreement clause and the $20 million personal liability it triggered, now that his overseas project had been documented as fictitious. I closed my laptop. I finished my report, I said. Thank you. The mediator took 40 seconds to collect himself. Then he turned to Julian's table. Julian had been staring at the blank projection screen as if it might offer him something. An exit, an explanation, a different version of the last hour. What are your thoughts on revised terms, Mr. Croft? The mediator asked carefully. His attorney was already leaning over, whispering, sign. You sign now, or you answer to a DA. Mr. Davis placed the new agreement on the table. 42 million in joint assets to me. All debts, personal, corporate, and contractual, to Julian. Voluntary divorce, clean severance. Julian stared at the document. I don't agree, he said, his voice rising, brittle with the anger of a man who has just realized the ground under him isn't there. This is robbery. You can't take everything. Mr. Croft, Mr. Davis said, and his voice had the particular quality of someone who has practiced patience for decades and is now simply done with it. This is the last moment of leniency available to you. Refuse, and we withdraw the agreement. What follows will not involve a mediator. The room was very quiet. Julian picked up the pen. His hand shook. I noticed that. He signed. As he stood, his face was the face of someone who has lost something they were absolutely certain they couldn't lose. He looked at me with something that might have been hatred and might have been the beginnings of a terrible understanding. You planned this, he said. Not an accusation. An autopsy. Yes, I said simply. 2 uniformed officers were waiting in the corridor. Sergeant David Miller, 26 years on the force, showed his badge and the arrest warrant. Suspected attempted homicide, insurance fraud, commercial fraud. He was professional and efficient, and gave Julian the same steady, dispassionate courtesy he probably gave everyone. Julian turned back to me one last time. I was standing by the window, the city spread out beyond the glass, my phone in my hand showing the 911 call I'd placed that morning to ensure the timing worked. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything left to say. The trial took 9 months. Rebecca's forensic work held. The garage footage held. Frank Reyes and his 2 technicians testified with the composed authority of people who work with physical evidence every day and are not easily shaken. Patricia Huang testified. 2 other women came forward. Julian was convicted on 3 counts, 15 years. I know this because Rebecca texted me the verdict, and I was sitting in my new office on the 21st floor of a building 3 blocks from my old one, reviewing a risk assessment for a multinational acquisition when the message came in. Julian got 15 years. Justice served. I read it twice. I set the phone face down on my desk. I looked out at the city for approximately 30 seconds. Then I picked up the risk assessment and kept reading.